Welcome into Louisville Focus, and today we are at the flagship of Museum Row, and that of course is the Frazier History Museum. With me now is the president and CEO. He is Mr. Andy Trinan, and if you know Louisville, then you know Andy. Andy's been here a long time and excels at every level. Andy, welcome into the show. Thank you so much.
You are too kind, John.
Right.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I'm going to ask you to do, this is our official open for the show, so elevator speech on what we're going to see today.
The Frazier History Museum is where the world meets Kentucky. I tell our people every day, my goal is to mean more to more people every day. We're a fairly new, young museum. You know, we were founded 20 years ago in 2004 by Owsley Brown Frazier. We have been where the world meets Kentucky and the official starting point of the Kentucky Bourbon Trail just since 2017. So all of this is new. We want to have an impact. There is no better place to learn about this great Commonwealth of Kentucky than here at the Frazier History Museum, where you have cool Kentucky, you have the Commonwealth, you got our bourbon exhibit, you have Kentucky Show that airs 5 times a day. This is the place to be to learn about the great Commonwealth of Kentucky.
All right, so much to see and much to learn. Once again, welcome to Louisville Focus. Yes, there is a lot of significant national history here at the Frazier History Museum, but also a lot of great local history as well. Let's talk about nightlife. Let's have some fun with Simon Miners, who is a communications and research specialist here. Simon, when I think about Louisville nightlife, it is very diverse, very vibrant. You've got a little sampling of just about everything, but this guy is kind of important.
This is the Phoenix Hill Tavern Moosehead. I'm sure you covered Phoenix Hill Tavern in your days.
Oh, yeah.
So, for those who don't know, though, Phoenix Hill Tavern opened there at the corner of Baxter Avenue and Broadway, right across from Cave Hill Cemetery, back in 1976, owned by a fellow named Ben Rogers, same fellow who opened Jim Porter's Good Time Emporium. But they became this huge, I mean, it opened on the second floor of a warehouse there, just as a nighttime bar, but over the years they expanded to the whole building, and they had all these different spaces in there for live music. So they had, I think, a saloon, a solarium, a piano parlor, all these things. But they were definitely known for their kitschy, eccentric wall art, things like that, their furniture. So the owner would go to these craft fairs and antique malls in the early 1980s and collect eccentric stuff like this. So he found this in the early 1980s. This is a taxidermied moose head, about 150 pounds. It's from the 1960s.
So what happened to his chin?
So the chin, there's a lot of live music acts that go through there, right? You know, Blue Oyster Cult, Kansas, Tori Amos. And for luck, they were told to scratch the chin on the moose head so that they could get good juju with the crowd. And it was mounted there on the bar, in the saloon, so they got to see all these historic shows over the years. So that's why the skin and the fur is mostly worn off the chin today.
What a great story.
Yeah.
You know what I find is interesting about nightlife in Louisville is you go to a lot of towns and it's very cookie cutter. But Louisville was very diverse. You would have live music, as you mentioned, all the different experiences in one bar. I remember Jim Porter's had all these different experiences, as did Phoenix Hill Tavern. So talk a little bit about that, because a lot of this memorabilia in here speaks to that, doesn't it?
Sure, yeah. I mean, my experience, I was born in 1988, right? I grew up going to Bardstown Road in the 90s, seeing people with green mohawks and septum piercings and just going, this place is so eccentric, what is going on here? And this is very different than the Bardstown Road my parents had grown up with in the 60s and 70s and such. But we have items like the Erectasy storefront sign that, you know, that opened in 1985, I think in Poplar Level, but it moved to Bardstown Road and ended up closing in like 2011. But growing up in the 90s and 2000s, they had shows there for the Foo Fighters and I think John Mayer, all these great in-store performances, but it was like this subcultural hub where people would go there, and so people always, it's nostalgia bait that we have all this stuff for Gen X and millennial folks in Louisville who've grown up around these things. We have things that predate my time as well, like the Teddy Bears Lounge awning from downtown and the Club Madrid signs from 3rd and Guthrie. But we're trying to become this is one section of our Cool Kentucky exhibition, which is all pop culture of the state of Kentucky. And this is really just a nod to Louisville nightlife, like you'd mentioned. And we're trying to become more of a destination for that, so people know that some of the history they grew up with is now history that's fit for the walls in a museum. We want people to know that.
I'm curious about the feedback you get from visitors, and specifically people who happen to live here in Louisville, were raised in Louisville, and they experienced some of the nightlife back in the day. What kind of, I mean, I would think there's probably people, I'll just throw out an example, who maybe were engaged, or maybe their first date, or saw a certain band, one of the great bands that you mentioned, and they go, I was here then. And they come in here and it really brings it back to life. Do you find that to be true?
I absolutely do. I mean, when I did my research, this Phoenix Hill Tavern, I didn't spend much time there, but when we obtained this object, I said, I got to do my due diligence. And I went through and I read a lot of the history of this artifact. And one of the things I found was that when the Phoenix Hill closed in 2015, Courier Journal interview went around and asked a lot of folks what are their greatest memories of going to Phoenix Hill Tavern. And one of these quotes they got was a fellow said, "I remember October 1984. My wife and I were on our first date. We went in the saloon and we sat and watched the Bobby Lands Band, and we sat right under the Moosehead." And people have these really distinct memories of their life and how it, works together with these historic scenes in Louisville. And so we want people to feel those special things when they come in our museum, because Kentucky history isn't just the settlement and Daniel Boone and the Corbett Museum and Bourbon. It's Louisville too, right? It's the Louisville nightlife.
Wow, you're bringing back some memories for me. If you don't mind, I'm going to share a few, okay?
Please do.
Bobby Lands Band. I remember them. I was working for LRS 102, Rocky and Ramsey, and we introduced them a lot there at Phoenix Hill Tavern. Also, we did a promotion at Phoenix Hill. You could never do this. When the temperature hit 102 degrees, because we were 102, we gave away beer for 102 minutes to anyone who walked in. Those taps, Simon, just stayed open. Everyone just beer. And for 102 minutes, served it up. You could never do that, as you know, today. I introduced Stevie Ray Vaughan at Phoenix Hill Tavern. I think the Red Hot Chili Peppers were there at one time when they first began. So all of this history that you know so well is all, to me, comes to life in my mind because I hear you say that. I go, oh, I remember the day. There's still some great nightlife, but you do have a real true respect, don't you, for the nightlife that we had, and I keep saying back in the day, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, right?
Look, it works for me too. I remember I lived right there by Phoenix Hill Tavern in 2009, and that was the year I turned 21. And I remember there was a big story that happened there, and I didn't attend this night, but Halloween night 2009, I think Jefferson Tark Bus was playing there at Phoenix Hill Tavern, and their frontman was Dave Moody, who was the bassist for Billy Ray Cyrus, right? Achy Breaky Heart. Yeah. Well, guess who was in town that night playing at Freedom Hall was Miley Cyrus, 16 years old, Billy Ray's daughter.
Wow.
So she had a big concert for all her fans because she was still a 16-year-old teen with all her fans. But she called up Dave Moody and she said, "Hey, after my concert, I want to get into that bar. I want to get into Phoenix Hill Tavern and play." So he was able to bring her and her whole entourage on stage at their big Halloween costume show. And they got up there and sang Joan Jett's I Love Rock and Roll in their Halloween costumes in the saloon right in front of this Moosehead. And it was one of the most electric nights. You can look it up. It's on YouTube today. But that's one of those historic nights, even as late as 2009, that people still talk about.
Wow, if that moose could speak.
Exactly.
He'd say exactly what you're doing. I love, you're a plethora, you like that word?
I like that, yeah.
Of information, Simon Miners. I really appreciate you sharing with us. And for folks who come here to the Frazier History Museum, are you available to speak to them, tours? I mean, I think people would love to have access to this kind of information.
We offer tours. We're open 7 days a week, and Monday through Saturday we offer tours at 11, 1, and 3, and we offer, I think, tours at noon and 2 on Sundays. So we offer multiple guided tours of our exhibitions every day of the week. I lead one tour a week, but if folks come in and ask for me, I'm happy to come down and talk to them and share my knowledge with them about anything we have in the museum. But we have a full staff of talented tour guides and education staff members that are happy to talk to you and let you know more about Kentucky history than you knew when you walked in.
Simon, you're good at it. I appreciate it. Once again, he is the communications and research specialist here at the Frazier History Museum. Come on in and relive some of the past. You know, I always like to say that Louisville is a great place to raise adults. Well, it's a pretty cool state as well. And here at the Frazier History Museum, that's what this exhibit is all about, is about how cool our state is. With me now is Jason Berkowitz. Jason, I would love to give your title, but it's a little complex. Help me out here, if you would.
It's a lot of words. Stories in Mind Facilitator. And what that means is we work to bring the museum to our many senior living facilities throughout the city of Louisville. So we recognize that a lot of people are just incapable of making their way to the museum. And so we like to bring the museum to them. It is their museum after all. A lot of the stuff that's located in here and found in here is part of what they've helped contribute to our history. So
I love that. So the Frazier History Museum has thought of everything. Now, speaking of, I said it's a pretty cool state, 120 cool counties. So this concept, I guess it's a little bit of history from every part of our state. So if you have out-of-town visitors, let's say for Kentucky Derby or whatever, this would be a good place for them to not only get a taste of Louisville, but get a taste for the entire state, right?
Absolutely. See, we believe that, Kentucky is so much more than just bourbon and horse racing. In fact, there are interesting stories that can be found all throughout our state in each one of our 120 counties, and not just stories as well, but music and other forms of culture. See, our state marches to its own beat, does it not? So, you know, we've got all sorts of wonderful traditions in Eastern Kentucky, just as many wonderful traditions in Western Kentucky. The same applies to the North and the South as well. So, again, Kentucky's so much more than just Louisville and Lexington, and we want people to understand that.
And you were telling me in our brief conversation before we started, you said, you know, bringing this exhibit together was great networking. All of these counties get together, and they all are very proud of where they're from and their own individual stories. Talk about when this opened in March, what kind of event that was.
So we did have an open house on March 15th to celebrate the opening of this exhibit. And basically we invited as many people from all over Kentucky to help attend this. So we had representatives from nearly every county in Kentucky. We also did something quite fantastic where we had 40 different about 24 different musicians and artists get on stage and sing. They sang My Blue Kentucky.
Oh, and
Blue Moon in Kentucky. I am sorry.
You know what? But the music history in Kentucky is very rich, so I could see how there'd be a big part of the exhibit. So if you would, tell me about some of the amazing stories here, because I think there's folks out there who say, okay, give me a takeaway. Give me a couple of good ones, Jason.
Well, one of my favorite stories, and it's actually a favorite of quite a few people here at the Frazier, is one from Hart County. If you know where Hart County is, it's in the southern central part of the state, Horse Cave, Kentucky. And the story is that around 1940, 2 students of Horse Cave Colored School decided they wanted to play basketball. Now, the only problem was they didn't have a gym, they didn't even have a basketball. But that didn't stop them, so they went up to their principal and they said, hey, you mind if we start a basketball team in Horse Cave? And the principal said, well, sure. I don't know where you're going to play, but you can play out in the court that's outside, a court made of clay. And so they did. He got them a ball, and they started their team. They were able to put together a team out of 50 students, about 25 males, and understandably, that team stunk to high heaven that first year. I don't know if they even won a single game, but before long, after a couple years, they were winning more and more games. Till 1944, when that team went undefeated, won the state championship, would you believe it?
Wow.
But that's not the kicker. Not too long after, a representative from the Harlem Globetrotters came knocking. He said, I want those 2 fellas to play for my team, Clarence Wilson and Carl Hellam. And those 2 individuals ended up becoming Harlem Globetrotters. Now, I ask you, what are the odds of that happening?
Wow, I would say pretty minute.
Yeah.
That's a great story. But not only do you have a lot of these oral stories and audio stories that people would like to hear, but you have a lot of visual artifacts as well. So tell me about some of the visuals and some that maybe folks would find interesting.
So we found it's really important to have representation in our museum, and we really wanted to focus initially especially on the smaller communities in Kentucky. We know they tend to be neglected, marginalized. People are much more interested in what we're doing here in Louisville, it would seem, or in Lexington. But see, that's unfair because in my opinion, some of the more fascinating and amazing stories originate in these hills and hollers of Kentucky. So as far as the objects are concerned, we reached out to county representatives, some part of that network I talked about creating at the onset of this whole project. We said, hey, is there anything you'd like to see in our museum from your county? So, for example, Nicholas County over there had this wonderful tradition of Clay's tobacco seeds. Now, there was a point in the 80s and 70s where somewhere between 10 to 15% of the population was working in those fields at one time. Population of only about 6,000 people. So you can imagine just how important that tradition is to them. Now, just a month back, I'm walking past the exhibit and there's a fella there. He's there with his young child, and he turns to his child and says, look, Billy, Nicholas County and a Louisville museum. And to me, that really is the most amazing thing that we can take out of this project, that people can come and see themselves in this museum and understand just how important and precious their heritage and history is.
Yeah, the Frazier History Museum is really, you've really, as far as a depiction of Louisville and of the state of Kentucky, you've done an excellent job, and I do think that is important because when folks come in town, yes, I'm not proud of Louisville, but I am proud of the state as well. For you, when you see people coming through the doors and they want to know a little bit about Kentucky, what do they talk about? What do they say they've seen? The stories you've told me are amazing, but is there anything in particular where you go, wow, that's the wow factor?
Well, I think when they start digging through the music of Kentucky, Simon Miners did a great job curating alongside county representatives, a great musical selection, songs represented each county. So we had 120 songs, but I think what people were really amazed by is the diversity of all that music. I think people have certain expectations when they hear Kentucky music. They think bluegrass, country western, etc. But this project demonstrates that we're so much broader, so much more diverse than that. So you have everything from, of course, bluegrass and country and western, but also cowpunk, trance, disco, rock and roll, all kinds of genres are at play here. So I think what we try to do through this project is defy expectations, show that we are so much larger than what people might expect.
Wow, Jason, this is really good information. I am so excited about folks who are watching Metro TV now to come visit the Frazier History Museum because there is so much to see. And as you mentioned, love music. I mean, everything from the bluegrass that you mentioned. I mean, My Morning Jacket, Jack Harlow here in Louisville, and then of course all that great music from around the state.
Absolutely.
So interesting. Jason, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jason Berkowitz, once again, the Frazier History Museum. You've got to come see it. We're just touching upon some of the great items, some of the great film you can see. It's all here at the Frazier History Museum. As someone who loves the city of Louisville, I'd like to think that we're a leader when it comes to gender equity. Well, according to a recent summit in Spain, we are, and if we're not, we're certainly getting there, thanks to the Office for Women and our director, which is Gretchen Hunt. Gretchen, welcome to the show once again.
Thank you so much, Sean.
So you've done a little traveling. This summit in Spain, the Change Summit, correct? Okay. Tell me, what was the mission of the summit?
So it was the Change Summit. Change stands for the City Hub and Network for Gender Equity. It's a coalition of 14 cities from 6 continents, everywhere from Tokyo to London to Barcelona to Louisville, Kentucky, and all in between. And so representatives from each city came, courtesy of Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, thanks to them, for a summit to share strategies and innovate about what cities can do to promote gender equity.
So I would think a lot of this would include safety, correct? I heard there was a section that was about caregivers. And so tell me a little bit about what you learned, what's some takeaways maybe for the city of Louisville?
So when you think about Mayor Greenberg's mission of a safer, stronger, healthier city, that's exactly what we were working on as well. And so sharing strategies from everyone from Mexico City, which is, a city that's a little bit bigger scale, 21 million, that has reduced their femicides or domestic violence homicides by over half. So learning strategies of how we work with law enforcement and culture to change that. You mentioned caregiving. We learned from cities like Bogota, Colombia, and Freetown, Sierra Leone about establishing what are called care blocks to essentially render care as a public good. So if you think about it, people who raised you, people who raised me, it's usually women who care for children, folks with disabilities, and then usually our elderly relatives as they age. And a lot of that work is not counted in our formal economy, it's unpaid. And so what Change is doing in a lot of cities is making what are called care blocks. So the city funds and supports places where caregivers can go, receive support, maybe their kids or elderly stay for a bit and they can fully participate in society. So we were really exchanging innovative practices. We shared about the Office for Women's Ambassador Program, our leadership program, and I'm really excited Los Angeles, a change partner, and Nairobi, Kenya, both are interested in replicating that program. So we were sharing what are our best strategies, but really we were learning what are good strategies. And probably the best part, the most innovative part, was seeing how the lived environment, the structure of the city, the way we build parks and transportation can make women safer and feel more included, and as a result kind of raise up the economy. So we did site visits.
Interesting. It sounds to me, Gretchen, like this summit was a lot of, first of all, there was some teaching aspect, things that we're doing here in Louisville, but then there was the learning aspect of what can you take away from other cities? And I would assume, and you kind of lend me to believe this with your conversation, with our conversation, is you said partnerships, continued networking, continue to work with these cities. Is this an ongoing process, this summit?
It is. So we are part of this network. So we meet monthly virtually. So thank goodness for for technology because that's how we're sharing strategies, but there's nothing to substitute for being in person and building those relationships. And then what my property law professor talked to us years ago of walking the land. So when we went to sites in Barcelona city government that support women entrepreneurs and seeing what that looked like. When we went to a place called Plural, I'm wearing this, which is a center for men that's run by their government to support both men who want to change something in their relationship. Maybe they've noticed they're being abusive, they want to change that, or supporting new dads in fatherhood initiatives. So things that the city are doing and getting to see them. But the most exciting was seeing their urban planning. We went to a place called San Antonio Superblock, where they have done much like we're doing on 9th Street to overcome the 9th Street divide, and on Broadway and Bardstown Road. They did traffic calming, more pedestrian friendly, and creating spaces that are more inclusive for pedestrians, but also women and families. And just seeing what is possible was really, really innovative and made me excited to bring those strategies home. I will say that we already partner with the Office of Immigrant Affairs. We're doing this work in partnership, but we want to take this and share it with planning and economic development in all parts, transportation, parks, every part of city government can do things to adapt the work that we're doing.
Gretchen, it all seems to circle back to what we began with, which was a lot of safety and health, which is important to Mayor Greenberg and this administration. And then, of course, gender equity, which is so important. And I'm glad to hear we have someone like you in a leadership position and your team who understands the importance of. So, and speaking of someone who believes in gender equity, our backdrop isn't too shabby either. So for folks who aren't aware of Tori Murden and what she stood for, so tell us a little bit about this boat.
I can only try to pay homage to the icon that is Tori Murden McClure, President Murden McClure, but this is her boat, and if you haven't read her book, I read it to my kiddo, just to have a great story about a strong woman being resilient, trying, failing, which I don't think is failing, trying again, getting back up, and just having that tenacity. And I think it connects to the women in this city. If you think about the fabric of women in this city, they are upholding a lot of government, a lot of nonprofits, they are upholding families, they are really the fabric and the infrastructure of our city. So to me, I can't think of a better metaphor of riding the waves of, everything that's facing us.
Gretchen, if folks would like to learn more about the Change Summit, what you learned in Barcelona, the benefit for the city of Louisville, how can they find out about this?
So you can go to citieschange.org and find out all about the member cities and reports that they've done. And then we don't want to just take that information and hold it. We are public servants. We want to share that with the community and see what input and ideas they have and how we can take it and run with it.
Give me that website one more time.
Citieschange.org. So if you spell out Cities Change.
Citieschange.org. Okay. Gretchen Hunt, Director of the Office for Women, thank you very much. Really appreciate you coming on. We want to be a leader when it comes to gender equity, and thanks to the team that Gretchen has under her, yes, we're getting there. Louisville, great place to live. President and CEO of the Frazier History Museum, Andy Trinan, rejoins us now. And Andy, okay, you gave us a little bit of an overview, but I think it's important for folks to know that the Frazier History Museum is much more than what you see and what you learn. You guys are mission-based.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we do 4 major fundraisers a year. Our next one is coming up on the 27th of July, the Summer Beer Fest at the Frazier. We do Lights on Main in the month of December in partnership with I Would Rather Be Reading. We have a Night at the Museum Gala coming up in April, and then we have an Owsley Brown Frazier Sporting Clay Shoot. So all of those things help us to do our mission-based work. We serve over 30,000 kids a year at no cost, Title I students who otherwise wouldn't have a museum experience. We serve our senior community with a program called Stories in Mind. We have a group of people that goes out 11 to 13 engagements every single week in senior care facilities. And that's to solve for loneliness, boredom, and depression. And they're talking about the state of Kentucky and the things that we do. Our Frazier Weekly, it goes out to 40,000 people every week. That is at no cost. We're giving away free memberships to multiple counties in Kentucky to expand our brand. So yeah, there's a lot going on.
You can't help but be very proud in your position, because the Frazier family does so much good in this community. I mean, you can't take 10 steps without seeing something named after them, and it's usually something very philanthropic or good for the state of Kentucky. I talked to your staff, and they're very mission-based as well. Just their personality say, hey, we want to give, we're doing something good for the state here on Museum Row, and you are doing that. So for you, that has to be rewarding.
John, you wouldn't, I mean, I think about it all the time. I live in Owsley Brown Frazier's office. That's where I work every day. 20-year anniversary this year. And we're celebrating his legacy. This is something that he left behind for this community. This is a man who gave over $300 million to this community. And it's not the exact museum that he opened in 2004, but even when he founded this place, it was to use history to better understand who we are, what we stand for, and where we're headed. And we use those words all the time to make decisions about what we want to do and what kind of an impact we want to have on this community. So yeah, I'm very proud, and I sometimes think, what would Owsley think? We've got friends on the board that have been here from the beginning, and they say he would love it because you're having an impact, a positive impact on the community.
Okay, we've talked a lot on this show about the past and the history of Louisville and the state of Kentucky. Let's talk about an upcoming event that you've got coming at the end of July. You mentioned it, but this Beer Fest has become something that people really, an annual event that people really look forward to. And you don't have to just be a person who loves a cold, frosty wheat soda as I do. You can be someone who just loves a good time, networking, and being able to see this place too.
No, it is a ton of fun. This is our 4th year. It'll be our 3rd year out on Main Street. We've got about 30 different brewers from around the state this year. I think we're into 11 different counties with brewers that'll be here, each serving 3 to 4 beers, and then we'll fill in with other beers through distributors. We're about to release the new t-shirt. This is last year's t-shirt,
okay,
and I don't think you got one, so I'm going to give you this.
Oh, you are so nice.
This was to go with the Barbie theme. VIP experience gives you indoor access, so you get additional beers, you get an additional hour, you get air conditioning, you get indoor plumbing. We had a band up on the stage for the first 2 years. This year we're taking it all to the street, so we'll have roving bands up and down the street. We just got Watson secured as an in-kind sponsor. They're going to have the VIP lounge. A lot of their furniture is going to be out for people to lounge on. Music, over 200 beers, seltzers, sours, non-alcoholic drinks. We've got some great food vendors. It's going to be a blast, and it's fun to just be downtown in Louisville, such a great city. Main Street is always hopping, but on this day, it's extra special.
Oh, no question about it. Yeah, you want a taste of true Louisville, and not just the craft beers that are offered here, but also the architecture, this building in itself, live music. It's all there. So if you don't mind, and I may repeat this before we go, where do people go for tickets? You say there's a few left, so you better hurry.
Yeah, FrazierMuseum.org. You can get tickets. The VIP tickets have sold out in each of the last 3 years. I anticipate those will sell out as well. But there's VIP and general admission tickets available. FrazierMuseum.org. And if you haven't been out, we would love to see you out here. It's a great time, John. And you can be my guest this year.
Oh, you are such a nice guy. I'll take you up on that. Watch out. It began as a Frazier Arms Museum.
Yep.
And don't get me wrong, very important and historic, but it evolved to be more than that, which I'm curious about how it arrived at that point. Was this a family decision? Was this influenced by people in the community who said, hey, this is a beautiful building and I love what you're doing, but let's make it bigger? How did that happen, Andy?
Well, Mr. Frazier started it. He had this incredible collection of arms, and it's really the artistry of arms. I mean, beautiful stuff, and we still have a lot of that. We have Teddy Roosevelt's big stick. We have Geronimo's arrow and bow and quiver.
Whoa.
We've got weapons from 5 different presidents here. So we've got some incredible Custer's pistols. We've got incredible stuff. And that was his passion, right? And it was opened as the Frazier Historical Arms Museum. Mr. Frazier changed it to a history museum about 5 years in. And then 2015, he passed in 2012. And 2015, there wasn't a lot of repeatable traffic. A lot of people, they were saying, oh, I saw that, and then didn't have a reason to come back. So we started working with Doe Anderson, Todd Spencer, the president, Doe Anderson, a good friend of mine. He's also on our board of directors, on what do we want to mean to this community. And that's how we came up with Where the World Meets Kentucky. It's about Kentucky pride. It's about telling stories that people can relate to and that we can evolve. So every exhibit here, other than the Founders Gallery, is about the great Commonwealth of Kentucky.
You know what I love about it, Andy, is when I talk to someone who is from Louisville and loves the city like I do, like you do, you almost get giddy talking about some of the exhibits that you have here. Not only about Louisville, and we looked at the nightlife there with Simon Miners, which was incredible. It just brought back so many memories for me as an old guy. But also there's a pride here in not only the city, but again, the state. And that's important because when I think about, again, circling back to the family, the pride of working for the Frazier family who does so much good, and then coming in here, it all kind of fits, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And you know, I was in your line of work before, right? We're storytellers. And you've talked to several of the people on our staff today. All of them are really adept and outstanding at telling stories. So we come up with a plan, you know, how do we want to mean more to more people every day? That's why we recently launched that 120 Cool Kentucky Counties project. You know, we want the state, the whole state, to know that we are not only telling their story that they're helping us to curate, but also driving traffic throughout the state of Kentucky. We're telling people places to go, music to listen to, destinations to see in every county in this great Commonwealth of Kentucky. So there's a lot to be proud of. You know, Kentuckians are very proud people. So I think we've touched on something with that brand, and our team's just having a great time living in it. And the other thing is, we are not just traditional history museum. We try to be relevant in what's going on today in our world. Rachel Platt's on our team. She does this Bridging the Divide programming that dives into issues and tries to bring people together. And the 120 project, the same way, kind of solved for the urban-rural divide that exists in Kentucky and in the entire country. So the programming is to continue to learn from history and to make better decisions moving forward, just like Mr. Frazier said, to better understand our past, you know, to understand who we are, what we stand for, and where we're headed.
And where we're going, that's right. Okay, I know where you're going, because nothing wrong with learning and educating a little bit. You can do that here at the Frazier History Museum, but nothing wrong with a good time. So I bring it back to the Beer Fest. Once again, remind folks, you talk about, I don't care what you like. If it's a nail, if it's a Hefeweizen, or whatever the case may be, a sour, like you said. Can you handle those, by the way?
You
like those?
You know, the first year, I was a big IPA guy, right? And so the first year, you get your little tasting glass. The Louisville Downtown Partnership sponsors the tasting glasses. If you have like 20 IPAs, it's a little much. So you got to mix it up. You got to ebb and flow through the, you know, obviously we're consuming those things responsibly. There is a fun zone that allows people to, you know, dunk people in a dunking booth, and we're throwing axes and cornhole and all kinds of activities. So it's just a great time, great experience for you and your significant other and friends to come out and have a good time.
All right, so one more time, where can folks get their tickets? And there's few remaining, so jump on it. Right?
FrazierMuseum.org. We'll see you at the Beer Fest at Frazier.
There you go, Andy Trinan. Once again, you're the right man for the gig. Success moving forward as well. Keep going.
Thank you. Great to see you, John.
All right, Frazier History Museum with Louisville Focus. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to tell your friends about the show. And again, we'll see you at the Big Beer Fest.